Yo, this is Erb N Dub. I'm going to give you an insight in how I make music, how I mix down tracks, how come I've started using the SubPac as well. So what we got on the screen here is Cubase 8.5. I've been mixing a tune today. I've made it with two other guys from my hometown, Brighton. This record we sent over to the label. They loved the record, but they was like, it needs more bass. So as I got a SubPac, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna mix it with the SubPac. I finally got the frequencies that I'm after. I got the low frequency rumble. I can feel it in my back and I can hear it. And I can also see it when I'm looking at the analyzers. So yeah, it's been a wicked day, but this track's finished now. So I'm going to play the record and then I'm going to talk you through how I sort of mixed the record, not so much how I've made it. Have a listen. Right, so in each of these folders, you have, that's just some extra parts. These are my drums. So they've all been programmed in audio. They've probably been made beforehand through sound design sessions. Some of them may have been tailored while we were making the record. So you have your sound effects folder, I have orchestral for the orchestral sections like this that we played in. And then you have your synths folder as well down here, which is all different basses that you heard solo it. It's even got the lead line running in that folder as well. So if I close all these down, I want to talk to you not so much about how the record was made, about the sort of end result, about mixing it. So I treat each channel, each individual channel, I get them mixed how they should be. EQ'd, compressed, and so on. And then I work on mainly my grouped channels. So let me open the mixer up in Cubase. I have my percussion, kick group. So there's a percussion group, kick group, snare group, and an overall drum group. So my percussion here, all the percussion that you would have heard in the drums goes to this channel, and then I treat it accordingly. So I've compressed it slightly. Actually, the attack is compressing it quite hard, as in instantly. Then I've used this Camel Crusher with some tube distortion or saturation, more compression. Then I've got two side chains on it, which essentially are just ducking the percussion every time the kick and the snare hit. The reason I wanted to do that is so it preserves the transient of the kick and the snare. It's very important in drum and bass. So I've got an overall EQ on it as well, set to mid-side mode, and then I've got a limiter. The limiter basically just puts a lid on the percussion. I didn't want, with this particular track, the percussion rattling around. I wanted it to sound like it was boxed in. So the limiter is doing its job there. So let me close these down. I'm going to show you the kick drum group. So there's an EQ here. We have taken out a lot of the low information and the stereo information. So there's no stereo down here. So it's essentially mono. And what I found was when I was working today on the SubPac that a lot of these low frequencies I didn't necessarily need in this particular record, so I cut them out. But then I compressed it, compressed the kick drums, and realised that I needed some of them back. So I used R-Bass, and I could really feel this on my back when I was working today. So I've just used this R-Bass plugin by Waves to put some of the sub-frequencies back in. Here's a Camel Crusher again. More compression, more saturation, and then I use a transient shaper to put some of the transients into the kick drum, make it a bit more spiky. Then on my snare, I have another EQ, some more R bass. Again, when I was working on the snare drum, I felt like it needed a bit more weight. An EQ kind of does that, but these sorts of plugins add a kind of saturated sort of low frequency boost. So I ended up using R bass on the snare, and I could feel that again with the SubPac. I was fine tuning. I didn't have it mega loud in the studio, so I was relying on my ears. And obviously, with dance music, you need to turn it up a bit to feel the sub. So where I was working at quite a low level to get this mix right, the SubPac was coming in really handy because I didn't have to have it mega loud. So yeah, on the snare drum, I was using this plugin called Fatso. I was using it for compression and some saturation, Pultec EQ, which is a UAD1, more Camel Crusher, which is on this screen, and then a transient shaper as well to give it some more transient. All of these, the percussion, kick, snare, go to one drum group. So let me just solo that folder. So on my drum group, I have this EQ, Fab Filter, Pro Q, and I've taken out a lot of the stereo information in the lower frequencies, so it's in mono. More Pultec, so it's a global EQ on my drum group, more saturation and a bit of compression as well. Then I use the limiter. This limiter is an essential part of the overall drum group because it not only compresses or limits the drums, which makes them a bit louder on the ears. I've actually given it like a 4 dB headroom. So even though this fader's up at 0, it's still got 4 dBs of headroom. It won't go into the red. And that's essential for this style of record because I need it clean, and I need it weighty, but I can't go into the red. Otherwise, I start getting unwanted artifacts caused by the program Cubase. So I didn't want any of these group channels, any of the effects channels, which are these purple ones, to be going into the red. And allowing myself 4 dB of headroom on my drums, probably the same on my basses. Yep, I put a limiter on the bass group, so it's got 4 dB. When it gets to the master fader over here, I've turned it down here just for this video, but when it gets to this master fader over here, I've actually got some headroom left to play with. It's not going miles into the red, so I can literally just put some mastering plugin on and I'm good to go. So let's have a listen to the drums. I have some effect sends over here to put some of the transients back in. I just use 2 transient shapers because the kick and the snare going into a limiter can sort of shave off the transients, so I've just put them back in here. I have parallel compressed copy of the drums being sent to this compressor. It's called parallel compression or New York compression, and taking out some of the lows, so it adds even more weight, kind of a bit more of a splashy sound as well when you over compress something. And yeah, that's about it on the drums. If I put the synths in as well, on the synth group, I have the EQ working on the mid and side, some stereo expansion. It's quite strange how I've done it in this way, but it works. This is automated, and this would be filtering some of the basses at certain points of the records. UAD and Pultec, more Camel Crusher. I like the sound of the saturation, the tube distortion on it. Then there's that limiter I showed you a second ago. Now I've used sidechain compression just to duck the basses off the kick and the snare. So if I play it, so it just allows room for the drums to poke through. And sidechaining is very important because it allows you to get more loudness out of the record, because if everything's fighting for the same sort of space, you're never going to get the loudness that we need to achieve now in modern day drum and bass. So yeah, that's kind of like an overview of how I'd mix down a record, even on my other groups and stuff. Yeah, on the middle 8 section, like the orchestral section, I used another limiter, another one on here as well, which is even just the lead line, really just sort of taming everything down to keep my headroom throughout this mixing stage, the group stage. All my individual channels, which are back here, are all probably, I'd say, going to be out of the red. I can see no red lights on there. Yeah, so I've given them all headroom before they've even got to the group channel stage. So once I was happy with everything, it was all balanced, I sent it over to the other guys I was making the tunes with, sent it over to the label. The label like loved the record, but it needs more bass. So back again, I was with the SubPac, really focused in on the low frequencies, the lower mids. I could feel them, I could see them on my analyzer, which is here, and I could hear them as well. But yeah, using the SubPac, it's basically immersed me in mix downs. I can feel it on my back. I can hear it and I can see it with an analyzer. It's incredible. It really has changed my workflow. Like, I've been doing sound design at home. I was making sounds the other day in a field because it's summer in the UK at the moment. All with the SubPac. A few years ago, I was crazy. I would just get my headphones and I'd turn them up and up and up and up, trying to feel the music. It's not possible. So what I found now with the SubPac is I'm working at low volumes on my ears, because I can feel the bass. I don't need to have it loud, and it's completely changed how I'm making sounds, how I'm doing mix downs. I'm actually having more fun as well because of the SubPac. I'm carrying it around with me on my laptop. It's like it's an addition to my everyday working, which I will continue using for years to come. It's absolutely incredible. So yeah, I ended up basically tuning the low frequencies today by using the SubPac and my visualizer. I can see there's a lot of low frequency weight here, which is great. Which, if you want a really meaty sort of weighty record, it's all around the low frequencies and the lower mids. You need to get that right. So on my master fader, I've put ozone. On certain types of records, like the neurofunk records I'm making, I use a different limiter. I'd probably use something like the Fab filter, but on this more clinical sort of dance floor drum and bass, I've used ozone. So I would have started with a limiter, mixed into the limiter, until when I was happy with the overall mix, I added some extra additional parts of ozone, just to give it a bit more sort of clarity. I couldn't really do much more with the mix, so I've just given it a bit of over EQ, boosted around the snare sort of frequency and a bit of extra tops. Here I have multi-band compressor. It's mainly working on the sub-low frequencies. Again, I could feel them with the SubPac, so I was isolating this band, soloing this band, and really honing in on getting the weight right of this record. These other bands are compressing, but ever so slightly. I'll play it and you can see, so the sub frequencies. So just taming some of the tops a little. The lower mids I'm taming a little bit, but I was concentrating on the lower frequencies today, the sub bass. I have a bit of excitement set to a bit of tape, just boosting, exciting the tops, only ever so slightly. Stereo imaging as well, it's a small amount of stereo expansion, just on the higher frequencies, just so I've got that sort of stereo feel. It's being played in nightclubs, but it'll also be played on radio as well, I'm sure. So you just want to have that widespread, that nice mix down. And also it's nice when you listen to it on headphones and stuff that everything's just a little bit wider. A lot of all of these processes I've done within the mix before this stage on the individual channels, really worked on the stereo, really EQ'd stuff, compressed stuff. But this is just like, icing on the cake, sort of the last 1%. The limiter, it's great for this style of music. I used it on a clipping setting. You've got 4 different types of limiters, and actually you've got more because inside this one and this one you have different modes. I've just adjusted the character a bit and limited it. So that's pretty much it. And there's nothing more to what I'm doing. It's very slight amounts of EQ. Well, you're not even hitting 2 dB of EQ. That's still a lot in the sort of mastering stages. But yeah, I've just sort of done very subtle amounts apart from the limiter, really. So yeah, that's basically sort of how I'm working on mix downs on dance floor drum and bass. So, and I just got to big up the guys at SubPac, because without the SubPac, I wouldn't have been able to do this mix today. Nowhere near as quick. And yeah, the SubPac is excellent. And if you haven't checked one out, you've got to check it out, man. It's so much fun. Not only in making music, but also, in entertainment. It's absolutely wicked. So yeah, I'll catch you all soon.